Okay, so thank you, and Carlo, we're pleased to be able to present how we were a partner in terms of executing the vision of what was the store of the future. And if we kind of look at how Co-op came to be in terms of the partnership with Carlo and team, it really was visionary when we think that when we anticipate that this was started in 2015. And as we move into the supermarket of the future, a lot of these technologies, a lot of these expectations are almost becoming the norm, right? So what was once upon a time a real stretch on what could it be, it's almost the anticipation today that it's the norm. So really the phygital, or how the physical and the digital come together, is this not moving, Gav? No.
Talking about collaboration.
Is this the clicker, righto?
No, it's just this guy over here. It should just be that.
No.
No joy.
No joy.
No joy.
No joy.
No joy. When in doubt, we stop and start again.
Okay, so when we think about the physical and the digital, it's really a case that the consumers are really far more liquid at the moment. No?
Gonna have to mime.
Gonna have to mime?
Yep. 3 words.
3
movie,
words.
First word, second syllable.
It's just that one there.
Perfect. Good.
Combination.
Okay. So the digital is really transforming the consumer journey. So when we think about all the beautiful spaces that Carlo's talked to us about, it's really a case of, you know, the experience of shopping is bringing communities together, and how communities come together is very much tied by food, wine, and the concept of the table that Carlo spoke about is really coming back to our roots as how we collaborate, how over time we've bonded, we've traded, we've shared many loving memories, but it's really becoming part of how the store of the future is. This is all not working. I'm going to move across here, and hopefully everyone can hear me. How the role of the store is changing, and why that role is changing is because as we think about, you know, merchants many years ago thinking about economic quantities. Oh, okay. Really, this is ad-libbing today. So when we think about, you know, the store of the past, it was really about merchants selling product efficiently to customers, marketing, sales and service being highly integrated, as opposed to today, people are becoming far more attuned to what they desire, and more importantly, that desire is linked to trust. So when we think about the data that Richard spoke to us about before, and how important data is becoming to the value chain, and sharing data is very much linked to value and its intrinsic connection to customers. What we're seeing in the future is consumers are focused more on discovery, consideration, in order to be able to build that trust proposition, not just with the merchant, because we are moving from being a shopkeeper to a customer keeper, but how they're actually building a loyalty and a connection with brands. So in terms of the physical store of the future and how digitisation has actually disrupted that, and we really focused on the why. When thinking about the collaboration with Carlo, there was the execution of the technology, but far more importantly than the technology, it's why did we want to create that connection with the consumer? What was going to change the consumer's preference around how they engaged? What did they expect in that engagement model? And more importantly, how did they begin to build trust? Because that trust is almost becoming the loyalty that is the commodity of the future. So we've moved from, you know, buying when I want it, so moving from basic shopping and an experience and a value proposition that's based on price, to a more a smarter experience based on smart shopping, but then really moving to a tomorrow of more liquid expectations and the customer being able to buy when they want it, and fully focused on integrating that moment of shopping into their life moments. And with a big part of that comes that traceability equation. So really, as we understand retail today, it's changing, right? consumers don't interact with us through touch points that are just moving through a turnstile and going into a physical store. They're beginning their research through digital channels, right? They're expecting that research to really refine what it is that's important to them, right? And so how we then start to talk to consumers, how we engage them is far more focused on moving away from, you know, a situation where we're talking to segments of many customers to talking to one and a high level of personalisation. And really, as we think about that journey to personalisation, there are far more connection points that enable us to think about not just the communication, but where that communication becomes far more relevant in the experience. So we saw the tag on the cattle and how we're able to trace that journey through the life cycle. But this is also not about the life cycle of the produce, but how the consumer at a particular point in time wants to interact and wants to understand more about the product that they're buying into and bringing authenticity to that trust proposition. And all of that is enabled by digital traceability. And trust is a really, really important part of how we think about the collection of data, particularly in your industry, because trust is becoming the centre of many of the digital solutions that we're thinking about today. Customers are very, very much focused on trusting in a brand, but more often than not, trust is not earned through transparency. Over time, we've told our consumers about traceability. We've asked them to trust us without really validating that with data, and digital traceability is changing that. When you look at these stats, right, consumers are willing to pay, right, for value when they understand that their product is linked back to the promise that you are able to deliver, and that comes through the technology that you're able to implement to be able to do that. And 92% of consumers are more likely to purchase products when they understand and when they trust the businesses that they're buying into. So really, when we think about the data, why we're collecting it, it's because we're actually moving away from telling and asking consumers to believe in a trust model that we're unable to demonstrate, and through various technologies really bringing that transparency to the forefront of the consumer and them engaging with us to be able to build that trust model. And this is not something that we're just seeing in agriculture. Companies such as Nestle, for instance, are implementing technologies where through a QR code, you're able to understand what the nutritional composition of a product is. And that's actually something that we've also seen on the tables. So really, it goes beyond the label so that customers are able to access that information and also understand that environmental footprint that's attached to the product. Walmart is a really interesting one. So when we think about the collation of data, and this is something that they've partnered with IBM on, Walmart really has positioned themselves quite differently in the market from where they've been a long time ago. And they're really believing that trust is right at the top of their value proposition. And what they're telling their consumers is they deserve a lot more trust and a lot more traceability around the produce that they're consuming in stores. And really what we're seeing here in the next clip is how Walmart has gotten behind the transparency transparency proposition and bringing that to life for their customers. So hopefully the video is going to work here. No. How are we going to get that to work?
It's a good one. It's worth doing something.
It's a worth doing. This is a really good clip, by the way. That's okay. We'll move on. We'll actually send the clip around if it's possible at the end, Sean. But, you know, really the messaging behind that is, you know, what seems like a small nugget of information at a particular point in the value chain comes together so that consumers are able to see from, you know, farm to fork what is their journey that the product's going on, but also more importantly, you know, accessing information that matters to them. So if we think about value, if we think about charging a premium for produce, you know, with that comes the understanding of what value do I buy into, and that's really what's brought to life through that journey, through the simple click of a QR code. And then there's also the adoption of a lot of what we've seen in Carlo's concept into, you know, the supermarket of the future actually becoming a reality. So this clip, which I don't think is going to play either, was really about Hema and their ability to bring, you know, community and a sense of fun and engagement into their supermarkets, and the whole concept of eating where you shop. So you see those formats not just providing traceability of the produce, being able to self-select the produce that is being cooked for you so you're able to enjoy that experience with your friends, but how you're able to tap into that product upon purchase and the seamless experience of you doing your shopping while you eat. So really here what we're seeing in terms of data is not just the data that you're collecting at every point, but how that actually comes together to drive real outcomes from a consumer point of view, because the data in small bits and pieces probably doesn't mean much, but as we bring it together, what it does allow us to do is stitch together the story through analytics of very specific outcomes. So, you know, if you think about the processing and you're moving up and down the value chain, what does each element cost, and how does that actually give you cost visibility to be able to improve either different outcomes from a manufacturing point of view, or rethink what you're doing at particular points of time in the supply chain to be able to bring a great deal more efficiency to your processes. So, and then the precision of the forecasting and the planning. So if we think about, you know, from field to store, what is it in the process that we now have visibility into that's either going to impact our yield or how we think about the processing to be able to drive a better outcome through the value chain, and really optimizing the resources that we have across the value chain so that you're constantly using information that you're curating through the various points of the digital process to be able to achieve results that are adaptable based on your circumstances and where you want to be potentially at the end of that chain. And really the transparency and the traceability, and I think someone made the point earlier that there's going to be a lot of data feed that comes through, but really what's key to this is not just having water sensors, not just having, you know, rain gauges, but really how does all this come together to be able to affect a better result at the end, but how are you actually moving through that value chain so that you're providing a better sense of traceability and transparency to your end consumer. So in summary, I think the best way to think about it is as consumers become more informed, as there's a higher value proposition to the product that you're actually putting out to market, transparency and trust is very much something that drives loyalty, and with loyalty there is absolutely better predisposition from your consumers to be able to pay a premium, which ultimately drives you know, a better trust and loyalty equation with your customers. So thank you, and apologies for the tech.